So welcome. This is Discovering Creativity, and thank you so much, Michelle, for having this interview. I'm very excited to get to know you a bit more about the work you have been doing, about your book and training. So I wanted to ask you, can you tell us a little bit more about your job as a creativity trainer for companies?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. I've seen, we've kind of been in similar circles for a long time, so it's great to
Yeah.
finally meet you.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, I started a company, the Center for Creative Emergence, in 1999, and it's all about applied creativity and mostly in work in the workplace. And so I work with corporations, government agencies, nonprofit, entrepreneurs, and it's really applying creativity to anything from leadership development to team building to creative thinking. Co-creation is one of my sweet spots, and um, community building. Whatever it is, using whole brain, whole body creative methods for next level results or outcomes or creating what's next. That's sort of the core of the tagline is consciously creating what's next. It's I'm very interested in using variety of processes to help my clients create what's next and more generative and life-giving, basically.
Thank you. So, what do you think are in your opinion, the greatest challenges that people face when developing the creativity? What have you found?
When I would say the resistances that show up. So one is the stories someone may carry about themselves. For example, somebody may have thought like, I'm not the creative one, my brother's the creative one. Or they have stories about themselves or their own creativity that were usually taken in sometime when they were young, whether it was by a family or society or a school. Um, but they have a story to overcome, or they just have resistances. It's not the way they've done it. It looks unfamiliar. Or I think another one is if you're trying to get creativity, trying to support people in their creativity, it's very important not to box them into your own creative style, to allow that they may create in ways you have no idea how to create. And so to learn how to follow that. And I think the three biggest fears that I would say I've seen come up around people's um, in their resistances to creativity is the fear of failure, or the fear of making a mistake or failure, the fear of being wrong, and which leads to, and the fear of the unknown. And that all, so as a result of those fears, if they're not acknowledged, sometimes they can help people think they're not creative. And but it's just important to know that they exist and there are ways of moving through them.
Hmm. I mean, it's so interesting because I suppose that if you think about innovation as trying things out, and very often they don't work at the same time.
Yes.
If you look at many products, failure is part of the road towards success.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, and the resilience,
Mhm.
uh, I think a lot of times the difference between people who take creative projects to the end or not is not about the idea, not about who's more creative or smart, but who bounces back the quickest, who adapts, who pivots, who can, I think if people see something that doesn't work out as an iteration toward what will work out, it's very different than seeing it as a failure or like a black and white, end all static, like this is done. Okay, now we know that didn't work. What else is possible? and and
Yes.
then, and then that helps you be more resilient and bounce back. That's zooming out to a larger story of, okay, we're trying a bunch of things, this one didn't work, so what else can we try, and then versus this one didn't work, it's a failure, I'm not creative, I may as well never try, that kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah. So it brought me to my mind two concepts. One of them is so our own self-concept, what we being creative or not. I'm creative. I'm not creative. And the other thing is that our own definition about creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Right.
So because everyone I found out is people seem to have their own definition, and they are very attached to their own definition.
Absolutely. And they often will associate with creativity with being in the arts.
Yeah.
Like you're either creative if you're an artist or a dancer or theater performer or something else, instead of everybody's already inherently fully creative. We just create differently and in different ways. And some of us have been socialized or educated or traumatized out of our natural creativity, but we're all already creative.
Yeah. So in
And
your experience, yeah, sorry, you want to say something else?
no, go ahead. Sorry.
If in your experience, what are the characteristics that you have found in high performing teams?
So in my experience because I tend to work, if somebody's working with me, it's usually they want more creativity and innovation out of the team or the team to feel more bonded. So through the lens, looking at it through the lens of that kind of performance, I would say they use both divergent and convergent processes. So it's not just convergent, analyze the data, break it down and keep going. Like they actually make time in their meetings or time in their creative space for divergent exploration, which means suspending judgment and going into the unknown and exploring. So I'd say discovery time is a big area that I've seen in teams that get kind of breakthrough innovation or next level. Third ways that, and what I mean by that, oftentimes someone else have, this is my idea, or this is my idea, and they're kind of vying for it. And if they can learn to create in ways where a third better way can emerge, then
Maybe a combination.
or a combination or integration or something new, but leaving an open space that it's not fully, one idea or another, that ideas can be integrated. They can be yes-anded. That's another one. Teams that know how to yes-and each other, not just no, yes, but. Yeah, because someone throws out an idea, yeah, but, and immediately going to why it won't work. And so holding space for the yes and where somebody can actually get into more exploration. I think that one, and just exploration and discovery space, valuing it and truly consciously making time and space for exploration and discovery. That I feel I've noticed has led to high performing teams and honoring the different kind of creative styles. That's very important. Not having everyone need to create in the same way on everything all the time.
Yeah, just to build on a little bit of that, this whole thing about affirmative judgment that Sid Barnes brought up in terms of evaluating ideas. He found a way to help people be a bit more cooperative and appreciating each other instead of political or legalistic and trying to defend your ideas as if you were in court, trying to give like 200 arguments why my idea is going to work and 200 arguments why your idea will not work.
Exactly.
So
yeah, affirmative judgment is great. Appreciative inquiry, building on improv principles and practices, yes-anding, adding on. So there's so many ways to expand the creative playing field before you get into just immediate, here's why your idea won't work and here's why my idea is great.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I found is that people are very fluent in trying to find out what's wrong with things instead of what's right. And sometimes they just make up story because a lot of these things are negative future scenarios. So even when you design the best possible outcome or idea or program, you try it out, it's never exactly what you thought it was going to be. But it's your preparation to learn from the experience that helps you, as you mentioned, modify. And then creativity is more successful as a positive response to an experience of something that you intended to be creative in the first place. So it's a process of learning from experience.
Oh, beautiful. I love, real creativity is embodied and it's through direct experience, and that's why I know both of us do a lot of experiential work in our work
Mhm.
because we can, hang up a PowerPoint and tell people, here are the 5 ways to be creative, or it doesn't matter unless somebody's actually experiencing whatever inner belief systems or thoughts come up to show that are present in the way, or how they interact with each other, what's going on within themselves, how, there's a whole way of becoming creatively more empowered within yourself when you own and embody the experiences, and you learn from them, and can make meaning from them, instead of making there's a big difference between making meaning and making excuses.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that people will interpret one experience in different ways.
Yeah,
But I mean, there are ways to validate, because you will always find different groups of people responding in different ways to the same experience. So what's going to happen is that, in theory, if you want to have a successful business, you want to, and if you want to attract a certain amount of people, you will be betting for the people that like that thing, the big the big number, instead of
right.
for outliers, the 5 outliers who love your product, but they are unable to become to make your business sustainable.
Right. Yeah. So, and then that in itself generates a whole bunch of other questions, like,
Yes.
and, once you have the idea or in what ways in what way, the questions you would ask to create the project or to market the project will be different than in what ways does this become sustainable and adaptable?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the methodology that you have been using, that you bring to companies? Do you have your own approach, your methodology? Have you
Um,
brought together other
yeah,
approaches, or do
yeah.
you use one?
All and
Yes.
I have a model I developed many years ago when I was working for a client. It's like an AIM creative process model. But when I see other creativity models out there, they kind of all overlap. They might have the similar words, because I think there is an actual organic process of how creativity emerges. And so I will say I love to create activities and prompts, and I've created many of my own, and then I've used many others and integrate them in unique ways. I tend to, one of my signature style is it's not just talk only. So I'll always use something else besides, in addition to verbal, but maybe some kind of improv theater based, or art drawing, or visual thinking, or moving the body and embodiment and using the body in different ways to solve problems, using storytelling a lot. So it's not just analytical thinking only, I should say. It's whole brain. And that's part of, sort of the signature of what I say. Everything that I do is whole brain and experiential, and we use the body. As far as taking people through a linear process, I can take them through a linear process, and I've done it, but I often find that the way creativity merges is more nonlinear. Like you'll go through the process and then have to go back to, oh, we need to diverge around this or converge around that, or now we're in this imagination stage, but now we're getting all this analytical, all this other kinds of things. So I take people through a process. Sometimes for me, it depends on what the objectives are. There are times when I'm hired and the objectives will lend to a certain process, then I will use that. If the objectives lend to something else, I work backwards. I find out what my clients' objectives are and work backwards around what I will use and how. And I definitely like to customize it for each group. And I leave a lot of space. I call it emergent space. I leave a lot of space in there for something that'll emerge that I can't predict. So we're not so stuck into, and now it's 10 after 5, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that. It's sort of, so it's this both structured and unplanned at the same time. It's kind of a dance.
Is this the whole thing about illumination by Wallace? The Wallace formula or
Oh,
paradigm, he talks about preparation,
oh yeah.
incubation, illumination. So you never know when the illumination is going to happen. You don't, it just comes on its own. So people have this aha moments. Okay, finally I get it. And they can give you a question, an idea at the point that you say, well, this is not the most appropriate time for this thing to happen. But the moment you appreciate those moments, then you can use them. I mean, appreciate the people that have those ideas, even though that's why they use this whole thing about parking lots, where okay, there's a place on the wall where you can put your idea anytime of, and then at the end of the session or this, we will go through all those things and see in what ways those can be meaningful in our process. Those are some of the things that people do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just key that we're, that like, John Lennon quote, like life happens in between our plans or something. I
Yeah.
also think creativity happens in between our best laid agendas.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, and so I think we can, especially, if we're working with a client, so we have a certain time period while we're there, uh, like I always say, the agenda's plan B, like have a agenda, or for me, that's how I
Yeah.
have a very clear agenda. And that's sort of my idea based on everything I know before I enter the room. Then when you enter the room and see where the energy goes, see what's happening, see what's emerging, you might have ways of adapting it in real time. So it's this kind of balance of left and right brain, of planning and improvisation, of structure and flow. It's just kind of, and so I think as a facilitator of creative process, we kind of become, we're the orchestrator a little bit, but also dancing with it, of what's really happening and how in that moment can we most serve what's really happening. And it may be just stay to the agenda. Like it may be stay to the agenda based on your time or what's going on in certain groups. And with other groups, especially if you have more time, or it may be adapt right there. Or, there are times where I know I've thought, oh, in that moment, something happened. And I have to think like, okay, what's mine to do right now? Because what I had planned to do isn't going to meet what's happening. And so then just start trying something new. And a lot of times I find that you can get the group to help co-create that with you.
Yeah. Well, there could be some sort of different levels. There's the cognitive level, the social level, and the emotional. So
Yeah.
if the emotional is very low, then it's going to affect what they produce. So I was thinking that maybe when we think about warm-ups, getting people to have a bit of an icebreaker and all
Yeah.
that could be very useful to look into those three components. And this brings me to my next question, which is not on the list, but I thought maybe you could have an interesting answer, which is what is your methodology to create a safe space? Because for people to come up with creative ideas, they are taking a risk as well, emotionally. So even as they don't come up with that, they have to they have to figure out that this is a safe space emotionally, and my out of this world idea is not going to be laughed at, or it's going to be appreciated. It's not going to be discounted or dismissed as not pertinent.
Yes. Oh my gosh, Hector. Um, Absolutely. I actually think that's one of the most important things. I'm so glad you brought it up. Creating I think it's psychologically safe space, emotionally safe space,
Mm-hmm.
and physically, literally. I know in what I do, sometimes people are getting very physical, so there are ways. So first of all, warming up, yes, and I think warming up, like start getting people in their bodies very quickly, getting people, but in
Yeah.
a way where they for sure can do it and they're going to look good. So they start to trust you and they start to trust each other, and they start to, getting people, um, breaking a pattern, but like a micro pattern break, not something big, in the warm-ups, like doing something a little different where it's fun, it's engaging, it starts the endorphins flowing. Now they're starting to trust you and each other. The
Yes.
other thing is setting up sort of rules of engagement that I call them rules of creative engagement, that, you know, where people, it can help people feel safer. So for example, I will talk about how in improv theater, which I've did a lot of improv, that one of the rules is make everyone else look good. And so I might
Yes.
tell a group, I'm committed to doing that for you. And is it okay that we do that for each other? And if they start to agree on taking care of each other, you know, there's things like that. I also believe in taking enough, so people often, or I used to anyway, not value enough of that initial warm up time before getting into the
Yes.
real heavy. Now I take a lot longer, take a lot of space, because what I found is if you take a lot of space to build that container, make it safe, help people look good, then they take little small micro pattern breaks or risks, you know, with each other. So then now all this goodwill is built up. By the time they actually have to work on the issue or the vision or the conflict or the problem or the innovation that they're really doing, they're operating from a whole new way of being. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Thank you. Just give me 1 minute. 1 minute, I'll come back. Thank you. Just things. Never mind. All
We're
right.
live.
So the
Yeah.
good thing about this is that I have someone who's going to be editing this, so they can.
Okay. Okay, they'll take that part out. Okay.
Yeah, it's just such an interesting topic, and I don't think that we spend enough time talking about it.
Yeah,
Some
I
people might.
agree. And I think another really important part
Mhm.
to creating a safe space that I really believe this is becoming a safe person inside yourself around creativity,
Mhm.
meaning learning to embrace your own, learning to be, embrace your own faux pas, your own creative style, your own make mistakes. You know, so for example, we're all human. There are times where you might try something or take a risk and it doesn't work, and how you react to it is going to tell your participants if you're safe or not, you know,
Yes.
for them. Are you someone they, you know, is your way of being something they can feel comfortable with in the room when they come in? Or are they worried? You know, the last thing we want is our participants to feel like they have to take care of the facilitator or can't talk, can't speak. So becoming a person that feels safe for them to be creatively themselves.
Yeah. And sometimes what I do with my students, I model the way. So because I also participate. So this is as a teacher, I can come up with a crazy idea. Everybody's laughing, so they feel okay. That's allowed.
Yeah, nice. Yes,
So that
yes,
so
beautiful.
but with a company, this would be a different story. So I'm going to modify the last question is to ask, what advice could you give to students who want to enhance and improve their creativity?
Okay, the first thing I would do to them, or advice I would give to them, is say, uh, befriend your own creativity first. You know, it's like take your own oxygen first.
Yeah.
Get to know self-awareness, get to know who you are as a creator, what brings you alive, what are your different. So the more comfortable you are in your own creativity, one, and also realizing other people allow for very diverse and different creative styles. You might, you know, some people come alive more visually, some people come alive more through movement, some people come alive through more intellectually. And I would say design for all of those and allow for all of those, and allow that in the creative process, some people come more alive at the beginning when, you know, the blue ocean, the blank canvas. Other people come more alive and their creativity kicks in further down when there's something more formed and structured. So I think it's so important to truly, so instead of expecting everyone to think or feel the same way or express themselves the same way, embrace the diversity of creative styles in the creative process. That, hey, I may come alive right when there's very little structure, and someone else comes alive when there's more. That's great. Instead of wanting them to contribute equally in the same way, I would also say, make a practice of getting out of your own comfort zone regularly. So, because if you're facilitating creativity, if you're really getting real creativity, not the boxed in prepackaged things you expect, but real creativity, you're going to be faced with surprises. You're going to be faced with things you might not know how to be with or do. And that becomes a big joy, like you're in the discovery with them. So if you practice, get comfortable with pushing your comfort zone edges. Get comfortable with a little bit of discomfort. So because when we come from our edges versus our comfort zone, we're more alive, alert, adaptive, responsive, and then once we get so comfortable that everything we do is so comfortable, there's no risk in it, we kind of lose some of our own creative edge. So I'd say find ways of keeping yourself on your own edges, and that will really help your group.
Well, yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you a final question, which is, would you like to tell us a little bit about your book?
Oh, okay. Well, my book is called, here it is. My book is called Pattern Breaks, A Facilitator's Guide to Cultivating Creativity. And it has principles in it. It has practices in it. It's about almost a third of it are activities. And I've designed them into, there are 18 different templates, like some are theater-based, some are visual thinking, some are storytelling. There's a different set of different templates. And then it has ways, a lot of what we talked about actually, how do you create a safe space? And it's both sort of philosophical, but it also has very concrete ideas. And how do you do your own self-care? How do you bring more creativity out of groups? How do you, and then it kind of has a vision for a more co-creative world, and a lot of focus on meaning, because I feel in general, if people can buy into and find meaning about what they're creating, you get a lot more creativity from them. So you can it's on Amazon, or you can go to patternbreaks.com, or you can go to my website, creativeemergence.com, and order it from there.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I will do that. And I really appreciate your insights. And I'm sure that a lot of people, as we continue to promote this, are going to benefit from your sharing. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was a real joy. I'm so glad to finally meet you. I've seen
Me
you
too.
on LinkedIn forever. Okay.
All right. Take care.
You too.
Bye.